This class is going to be the first class of 3 on how to stop bleeding in the event that you or somebody around you accidentally gets cut or punctured throwing knives. And it can happen. It can definitely happen. And I know of 3 examples where it has happened. Fortunately not to myself, but I've had some close calls for sure. I know one guy who was born blind in one eye, and he was throwing knives and it bounced back and put his other good eye out. Another guy I knew in the Army, I didn't see this happen, but some people that I knew, he was in my company, out in the field, we were training, we were infantry, and they were throwing knives, and I heard that a bounce back came back and hit this guy in the butt, pretty much his butt cheek. The guy wasn't even throwing a knife. He was just standing around, and somebody else threw a knife and it bounced off a tree and stuck him right in his butt. And it sounds funny, but it wasn't. The guys that were there told me they pulled the knife out and it bled profusely. And the man had to be medevaced out of the field to get stitches, and they were pretty strict telling her they don't want anybody throwing any more knives in the field, but we did anyway. But it can happen. And the other time, a guy was throwing knives I know of, and it bounced back and hit his son in the foot and cut his son's foot right open. And so there's 3 cases where people have been throwing knives and they've had bounce backs injure themselves, or 2 of them, it injured people that weren't even throwing a knife. Because if you think about it, if you're the one throwing the knife, you're watching, you're going to know if it bounces back, you're going to get out of the way. But if it could go somewhere else and it'll hit somebody that's not really watching, they're not going to get out of the way, and they're going to be the unintended target. So it's very good that you have a game plan up here, and also, to have some gear that you can pick up pretty cheap. I get the stuff online, but I've used this before, so this is the second take I've done on this video, so I opened this. It was in a sterile wrapper, but this is a pressure dressing that I keep. I've got 3 of them. One of them, actually 4. I've got one at home in the first aid kit. I've got one in my car glove box with gloves, sterile gloves, and I've got one on my motorcycle, and I keep one in my knife throwing kit, and this is one of them. So I opened it up. I did this video before, I didn't like it, so normally if you buy them, they're wrapped up in sterile so that when you open them up you don't have to worry about causing any secondary infections from a dirty bandage. So carry a gauze or first a pressure dressing with your knife throwing gear, and actually it doesn't hurt to buy a tourniquet. You can get them for under $10 online, a tourniquet kit, and hopefully you never have to use it. But it could be a lifesaver to have one. And if you don't have one, there's ways to improvise. And I'm going to get into that in this training. This is course 1 of 3. So this one I just want to talk about the first things you do to try to stop bleeding if you or somebody you know has been hit with a knife. Okay? You got 3 things you can do. 4. The 4th is do nothing and just bleed. Hopefully don't do number 4. First thing you do is apply direct pressure. If you get, no matter where you're hit, you want to put direct pressure over the wound. And that's where this comes in. The Army ones this was an Army one. And I've always trained this with 2 people, where I'm putting this on. I've never done this to myself. It's kind of hard to do this one-handed. So, knife comes back and it sticks into my arm and I'm bleeding. And it doesn't stay in my arm, alright? I get cut. If the knife sticks into you anywhere, don't pull it out. Let the doctors do that, alright? That's another class. Could happen. It could happen. So I've been cut in my arm. You want to put direct pressure over wherever it is. If it's your arm or your torso, leg, anywhere. Hopefully not your head. Hopefully not anywhere. So this Army one, which would come in a sterile package. Got them for $3 online. You can find them, pressure dressing. You put it over and you keep the pressure on over the wound hard. The idea is to get it to stop bleeding and get the blood to clot up on its own. This is while you're getting somebody to help you, you're going to try to get some help to get it stitched up and cleaned up properly. Alright, so kind of awkward doing this on my own, but with this one it comes with these so that you could tie it up, which is very handy. And if my wound was right there, I would want to put the knot directly over the wound. And if I'm by myself, I guess I need to learn to do this. To tie it up with one hand. I've never done this with. So I put the knot, right? I tie a big knot directly over the wound and keep the pressure on it, okay? You may have to do this for 10 or 15 minutes to get it to stop bleeding. The other thing you want to do is to elevate it above the heart. Try to elevate it if it's your leg or your arm to try to help stop the bleeding. Direct pressure and elevate it. For venous, there's 3 different types of bleeding. There's capillary, which is just a minor cut or abrasion. Venous is you cut a vein, that's going to bleed pretty good. Arterial is the other one. If you get an arterial cut, that's life-threatening. You need to call 911. And I'm going to get into that more in another class. So keep direct pressure on it. If you don't have anything at all, just use your hand. Hopefully a clean hand. If you got gloves, sterile gloves in your kit, use gloves. Put your gloves on. Don't let the sight of blood freak you out. Keep your presence of mind. Keep calm. If you don't have a pressure dressing, use your hat, use your shirt, use something as clean as you can find, but a cloth, preferably cloth. Put the cloth over and keep it down tight for 10-15 minutes, whatever it takes, to get that blood to stop bleeding, or that cut to stop bleeding. Elevate it too. So direct pressure and elevating. That's the first 2 things you do to try to get bleeding to stop. I highly encourage you to buy a couple pressure dressings or a bunch of gauze. Really, this is just gauze, sterile gauze padding. And the only thing different about this is it's got these so that you could tie it up, which is pretty darn handy. But if you don't need to be able to tie it up, if you can hold it in place, so you get your gauze, maybe your clean t-shirt, not your tighty whities, hopefully. The cleanest cloth you can find, and use that as your pressure dressing. And if you don't have anything at all to use your hand and just keep the pressure on it and elevate it above the heart and get help, get help. That's what you do to stop capillary bleeding. Actually, capillary bleeding I don't think is that dire, or venous. So the next class is going to be what to do if it's arterial bleeding. And that's a whole different category. If at any time you feel it's an emergency, dial 911. If you have arterial bleeding, it is an emergency. And I'm going to get into that, what to do for that on class 2. And I'm going to rehash this. So that's it for this class. I'll put some pointers up at the end of this video. That's all. Take care.